Howdy folks, Chief Meteorologist Nick Lilia here with your tropical update for June 23rd of 2019. Marching our way through June, almost to July. And again, as always, this tropical update brought to you by the good folks at Pine Belt Gutters. Big thanks to them for helping us out with these. I wanted to walk us through hurricane frequency this time of the year. We're still waiting for the peak of hurricane season. We got a long way to go, folks. We're still here in late June. Here's June 20th, so about 3 days beyond that. So we're at the little bump that you get kind of in the middle toward the end of June as cold fronts and little MCSs kind of fall into the Gulf of Mexico. We'll talk about what that means here in a second. Before we get a little bit of a dip as we head toward July, but then we really get a cranking as we head through August and into September before we start to kind of ease things back as we head through October. We get another little peak as we head through the end of October. Same thing goes. You get little systems that roll through a lot like early in the season. That kind of break off and into the Gulf of Mexico. Where do we generally look? Well, yeah, out into the Gulf of Mexico, the Northwest Caribbean this time of the year, and then just off the East Coast. Your bullseye in here is from fronts and systems that come crashing toward the Gulf. They get out into the Gulf of Mexico. Let's say you've got a ridge of high pressure aloft, and those thunderstorms just sit down there, and eventually, in some cases, they start spinning around, and you get a little centralized area of low pressure, or sometimes just the tail ends of fronts get broken off, the rest of the front goes, and you get a little piece that's left out over here. And that's why, climatologically speaking, that's a good place to pick up on things. Now, as we head through July, you stop getting the fronts down here, so you lose your little bullseye. But unfortunately, you kind of open up the door down into the rest of the Caribbean. Not the full Atlantic yet, but the rest of the Caribbean in terms of looking for tropical development. And the reason that you do so is that's where all the warm water is. This time of the year, it's in the Gulf of Mexico, 87 degrees. For basically all of the buoys, and it looks like we've lost even more data across parts of the Gulf of Mexico and just off of the East Coast. That's really disappointing. But the mid to upper 80s into the Gulf of Mexico right now and down into the Caribbean, but it's still a little bit cooler. Goodness sakes, we've lost a lot of data. As you head back out and into the open Atlantic with temperatures still rolling around in the upper 70s in some cases, low 80s, even folks holding on to just about 80 degrees and in to the upper 70s as you head off to the north. All right, so what's happening out there right now? Thankfully, nothing into the Gulf of Mexico right now. We're nice and dry. We got a little bit of shear out here. You can see the propagation of the clouds out here. And then we've got kind of the tail end of a little system that's out here. But into the Gulf of Mexico, we're feeling pretty good that nothing's going on. As we look out into the open Atlantic, I'm going to do so just to kind of highlight some things. You can see all the shower and thunderstorm activity down into the Caribbean. We can kind of slide down here. I'll put it at kind of chest high. You can see all the thunderstorm activity down here, but you can also see that it's getting kind of swept away to the north. That's a little bit of shear. You can kind of see it in here, a little bit of shear. We can go off the coast of Africa. This is where we'll look a little bit later in the year toward August, September, and into October, early October. But notice the blow up of convection, all the reds and whites and oranges, and then it gets off the coast because the water's not quite as warm. And look at it just fall apart. And that's what happens this time of the year. It looks super ominous. And then by the time it gets out into the open Atlantic, not so much. Okay, so what's going to happen as we head through the next couple of days? Well, let's go ahead and look at the 700 millibar moisture 850 vorticity map. And this is a map that just shows in the grayed out areas where we've got dry air in the mid-levels. Generally, when you have dry air in the mid-levels, you don't have showers and thunderstorms. Because if you did, it'd be moist. It'd be raining in the mid-levels of the atmosphere. You'd have a whole bunch of clouds out there. And then we're also looking at the little greenish, bluish, yellowish, and it even gets toward reddish areas. That's low-level vorticity. That's a fancy weather term for spin. And anytime you got low-level spin, you probably have an area of low pressure. Well, let's set this thing forward into time as we head through Tuesday of next week. We're still getting injected with dry air across parts of the Caribbean and into the Gulf of Mexico. And then we get another shot of some drier air from the Caribbean and into the Gulf of Mexico. I think we finally get to a point where we could have something start to think about developing as we get toward the beginning of July. But by then, there's really nothing out there to speak of. It looks like we get another system that comes off of the East Coast. There may be a little piece that kind of breaks off the back of that as we head toward the beginning of July. However, as of now, most of the model guidance says that there's going to be enough oomph out here to keep whatever it is out here, and away from the Gulf of Mexico and away from us. So there's a look at your tropical update for June 23rd of 2019. Brought to you by the good folks at Pine Belt Gutters.